who have showed up on time this evening. Thank you. Thank you. So first, welcome everyone. So my name is Stan Chambers. I am the president of the Triangle Iotas, and us, along with the North Carolina Black Alliance and the Beta Pi Sigma and Theta Lambda Sigma alumnae chapters of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, we are conducting our voter education series. And so this is a 5-part virtual series to increase voter literacy among underrepresented communities ahead of next week's election. And this effort was really geared towards Black people and other people of color to really have a better understanding of the impact of their vote. And so if you guys tuned in on the conversation earlier, we were talking about things such as gerrymandering and how that relates to voting. And in previous conversations, we've talked about the Electoral College and how that works. And for those who don't know, how Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote in 2016, but Donald Trump won the Electoral College, and that's why he's president. And we also talked about ways to make your vote count outside of an election. And so tonight is the final part, or the final discussion of our series. And tonight we're talking about your rights on election day and what problems you might face at the polls and what to do about them. And so a lot of people have, like me, have absentee voted. And if you watch news lately, you see long lines at early voting places. But there are some people who are going to vote after this conversation, and there are some people who are going to vote on election day. And so for those people, again, especially Black and brown people, we want them to have an understanding of any potential things they might run into. And so tonight we have 2 wonderful panelists to help guide the conversation. Our first panelist is Courtney Patterson. He's the chairman of the Lenoir County Board of Elections, which is in North Carolina. And we also have my frat brother, Landon White, who is a Baltimore-based civil rights attorney. And in his past life, he worked for an organization where he would travel to talk about and identify voter suppression tactics. And so I'll let Landon get into that in a moment. But if you 2 gentlemen don't mind briefly introducing yourselves for a quick moment, and then we will get things started. Oh, one thing. This is a free-flowing conversation. So this is not a you sit and listen. If you guys have a question, there is a Q&A section where you can ask your question, and we will interject questions during this conversation. Again, this is not a lecture. This is more so a conversation. So your participation would be greatly appreciated. And so, Courtney, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yes, Courtney Patterson. I live in Kinston, North Carolina, which is in eastern North Carolina. I work for an organization that works very hard to bring organizations, 501c3 organizations together, doing civic engagement work across North Carolina, raising the voices of people of color in terms of encouraging them to participate in the electoral process, as well as I serve as the 4th Vice President of the North Carolina State Conference of the NAACP, and of course the board chair for the Lenoir County Board of Elections. I guess that's probably enough about me right now. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, thank you. And then Landon, if you don't mind introducing yourself briefly.
Hey, you guys doing? Attorney Landon White, based here in Baltimore City, Maryland. I am a litigator, civil rights attorney. I've done everything from low and misdemeanor criminal to felony. I also have been successful in some police brutality matters. However, before going out on my own, I worked for in-house general counsel for the NAACP. And from there, I did some consultant work on some voter suppression issues in which I was able to go to different states, some of the battleground states, and from Alabama. I believe I've worked with North Carolina before, some of the NAACP local chapters. I don't think I've actually been to North Carolina in regards to that type of work. However, we all know North Carolina is definitely one of the battle states, not just for fighting for getting individuals to vote, but also some of the voter suppression in that state. I look forward to speaking to you guys today, and hopefully this has been a long, long work day, guys. So hopefully this does not turn into a lecture, and I look forward to speaking with my panel members, Courtney and Shakima. They've also been great prior to getting here today, and thank you so much, Mr. Chambers. I appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. So let's start with you for a quick moment. If you can just talk about your past experience with the NAACP and some of the things you've seen and heard when it comes to voter suppression.
Oh, I mean, it's where does it start? Until you're in this work, you really don't understand, or you really don't, you can't really comprehend the amount of voter suppression that's out there. I'll start from the basic early voting. I believe in 2012 or 13, there was early voting was cut in North Carolina. And it wasn't overruled until I believe in 2016. And that was the work from the NAACP, the Lawyers Committee, as well as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, LDF, which is slightly different. And we, were able to get that overturned. And, if it wasn't for individuals fighting, then early voting in North Carolina would not be the case. That's on the kind of the scale where attorneys look forward. On the scale where we need volunteers, people in the community looking forward, pamphlets. I've seen pamphlets in Ohio and Michigan that'll state, hey, come and vote for the Democrats on Wednesday. I've also seen pamphlets passed around and saying, I believe this is in Michigan, I could be wrong, I can find it, but basically stating vote for Hillary by putting the hashtag Hillary whatever on your social media on November 8th. I believe that was November 8th, 2016 election. You find these different types of challengers, okay? So you have challengers, and then you have poll watchers. Poll watchers, depending on the state, have to be anywhere between 50 feet away to 200 feet away. Most states fall in the middle of 100 feet. And if you have a poll watcher, and they're infringing on some of the individuals coming in, or asking them about who they're voting for, and that's a type of voter suppression. You also have the campaign watchers that actually will state that, hey, I believe you can have a certain amount per precinct that'll say, hey, this individual is not registered in this county. This is illegal. You have those individuals that'll do that, but they're not supposed to, they're not supposed to intimidate the actual voters. And then lastly, some of the things I see in regards to being a criminal attorney, and in a lot of states like in Florida, Maryland, a lot of the criminal individuals, not criminals, citizens with backgrounds that may have been vindicated, or that have served their time, served all their probation, are now able to vote in a lot of the battleground states, one of them being Florida. What you see is you'll see at certain precincts, especially in the Black communities, this is a Black issue, which I truly appreciate you putting on, Chambers, is that you're starting to see an enhanced police presence at a voting place. Now, I've been voting since I was 18 years old. That's almost 16 years now. And, one of the safest places I've ever been is at an actual voting place. There's no reason for there to be more than one police officer at the location, or one police car. And if you're somebody that, has had issues with the law, or we all know the Black community right now over the last 6 months has had issues, at least seeing police brutality on the screens. We all have police officers, friends, family members, but seeing it on the screens can get someone pause. So now, hey, did I have that traffic ticket? Do I have a warrant out for my arrest? When you see cars of 3 or 4 folks. So these are the different types of voter suppression that I've seen over the last, I'll say I've been doing this since about 2015. And since about 2015, these are what we need the people in North Carolina, as well as in all the different, especially the battle states of Florida, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina to be aware of.
So let me ask you this. So regarding these tactics, especially the ones that tell you to vote on another day or just put this hashtag up and you're good, is there any way to gauge how effective these tactics are? I guess one would argue if they weren't effective, they wouldn't be doing them. But from what you've seen and heard, like how effective are these tactics?
See, the issue is that based on, they're more effective based on the education systems. Okay, and earlier before we got on, you talked about the issue with how voter suppression goes to the census, and then gerrymandering, and then it may end off with criminal law. You can vote, or your vote will be based on where you're located in a jail and not actually where you're from. I mean, you're kind of going down a rabbit hole, right? However, what happens is that you really don't know the cause and effects of what's going on at the time that it happens, right? So I'm going to dig a little deep here. I haven't done this in quite some time, but just bear with me. So the issue is that you have, of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, you have Section 2 and Section 5, okay? Section 5, I believe, is pretty much the pre-clearance states, basically states that we know have issues. And those states aren't able to enact new legislation for about every 10 years. Every 10 years is where the census comes in, right? Now, under Section 2, basically, and I believe it's the Shelby Holder case in regards to, voter suppression, the Supreme Court is trying to say that, I don't believe they used the sunsetting provision, but basically that, hey, voting rights tactics are no longer affecting the American people, okay? However, under Section 2, we have to keep track of all the different voter suppression that's happening, right? It's because in a vacuum, it might not seem like, this flyer was only seen by 20 or so people, right? However, if we can collect 10,000 calls, 100,000 calls on election day, which will, this year I have a feeling we'll have close to 200, 300,000 calls, if not more, on election day, stating that, hey, I tried to go vote and they said I needed my driver's license, or I tried to go vote and there's only one entrance and my grandmother had to walk 3 miles to the front of the building because they had it gate off. These are different voter suppression tactics that we must document, okay? And the way that we document them are that there are certain organizations like the Lawyers Committee, like the NAACP, that have these, and I actually worked in them, these command centers all around the country. I want to give I guess I got to give some love to Anson Asaka, who's still over at NAACP, and Ms. Keela Crane, who Ms. Crane actually brought me on. She's one of my classmates, one of my peers. She's in Michigan right now. But these voter suppression kind of command centers that are taking phone calls and basically, kind of like if you see a bag at a station or on a bus, report it. If you see voter suppression, you have to report it, because after this election, I can, with the new makeup of the Supreme Court, we're going to have a voting rights Supreme Court, some type of case come down the pipeline. And that, the Department of Justice, the NAACP, all these different organizations must be ready to present to the Supreme Court, hey, here's all the voter suppression that we've had in North Carolina, in Texas, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania. And if we don't do that, what happens is that somebody like Courtney, who's the charge of the Board of Election in his county, does not have a foot to stand on when he's in these tough on these tough conference calls. If he's beating his hands on the desk and say, we need an extra polling booth, or we need these things, if we don't have this kind of evidence, it makes it hard on gentlemen like Courtney and Shakima that are doing great work in the community. So sorry if I was a little long-winded there, but you kind of had to get a little bit of history of how does this affect. In that moment, it does, but that's in a vacuum. We have to collect all the evidence we can to pretty much let them know that the Voting Rights Act is still needs to be in place, still needs to be enacted, and we must make sure that we have people that are enforcing that Voting Rights Act. So.
Great, great. Thank you for that. And for the record, for those in North Carolina, you do not need an ID to vote in this election in North Carolina, for the record. And so
Let me clarify something on that too, because I've run into it recently. If you, in North Carolina, for the next, 4 days now till Saturday the 31st, we have something called one-stop voting, or registering in the same-day voter registration, which means you can register and vote on the same day. Now, if you decide, if you're coming to vote or you're taking someone to vote, and they're going to do same-day voter registration, they will need a ID. They don't need a photo ID. They can use a HAVA document, which is a Help American Vote document, which says you could use a light bill or credit card statement or anything to say that you live at that location. So I just wanted to clarify that as far as ID, but you're correct. And if it's okay, there's one other piece I wanted to say. No one in North Carolina should go to a polling place and walk away and be told they cannot vote. If something is out of line and there's question about anything, I mean, whether they're registered to vote or whatever the situation is, they are supposed to be offered a provisional ballot. And then if there's something like an address missing, they can do the provisional ballot and then have until canvass to take that address into the Board of Elections and have it verified. But anything that if there is anything that they would, if they didn't have the verification for the address, they would do that. And then there are a couple of, okay, that's good right now. Did you want me to go on a little bit, Stan?
Yeah. But before you do that, there is a question, and as many Zoom calls as I've been on these past few months for working otherwise, you'd think I'll remember the hand raising feature. So there is that. So if you want to verbally ask your question instead of typing your question in the Q&A, you can do that. And so I'm going to allow Delvon to talk. And so, Delvon, you there? If you could unmute your mic. Going once. Going twice. Okay. So we will get back to him a little later once he's able to talk. So Courtney, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I did want to say a few things, and that is happening in North Carolina. One is that police are not allowed to post at voting sites, whether it's a precinct. Now, if they have business in there, they can go in and they can take care of that business, but they should leave. But there should not ever be a police vehicle parked at a polling site. And if you see that, that's something that you can call the 1-888 our vote number and report, and then that would be reported to the State Board of Elections and should be corrected. The other thing is that in North Carolina, you should not, nobody should come up to you and ask you anything. You always have the right to say to someone, I don't really need to answer your question. I don't need to talk to you right now. If there is a challenge of somebody, if they want to know anything about a voter, they have to go to the chief judge. You should never have to be encounter a voter, any kind of voter, anybody coming up to you saying anything. And what has happened 40 years ago, there was a dissent decree that was established that actually, because of some activities with people walking up to people telling them they couldn't vote, they didn't live in that county and whatever, they were on the wrong day to vote and all of that kinds. And it was so bad that the court said they could not go back into the polling places for another 40 years. This was in 1980, so this is the first presidential election that they've been able to go back. The New York Times reported the other day that basically, and I'll say it, but it's the way they stated it, said Republicans had recruited over 50,000 people to go in and to disturb voters at sites across the country. That's basically it. We have in North Carolina a group called the Oath Keepers that have been, I know they're operating in southeastern North Carolina. And there are other groups as well that are there to intimidate voters, but you should not be intimidated. And I say to everyone, if you see something, say something. If it's not even you, say something. Grab that 1-888 Our Vote number and call it. And because there are a lot of great lawyers on that line, at the end of that line, that will answer your questions. Landon mentioned the court case that was settled in 2016 in the Fourth Circuit Court and further upheld by the Supreme Court, whereas North Carolina voter ID law. And by the way, that was what happened was they waited until the Shelby case was heard, and then the North Carolina General Assembly put forth that law. And what happened was Judge Jim Wynn, who actually in his brief, I guess it is, in other words, in their decision, actually stated that that law targeted African-American voters with surgical precision. And that this was something, and what it did, it struck down 7 days, 10 days of early voting in North Carolina. It struck down same-day voter registration in North Carolina. It struck down pre-registrations of 16 and 17-year-olds in North Carolina. But it was all targeted to be voter suppression. And one of the things that was learned in 2008 and 2012, African Americans overwhelmingly voted in early voting, and that's why they attacked early voting. But you should never have to be intimidated when you go to vote. North Carolina, the buffer zone is 50 feet. Anything that happens outside of that 50 feet is definitely not in the jurisdictions of the Board of Elections. Nobody should bother you if you happen to be in line outside of that 50 feet. Now that 50 feet starts from the door of the place you go in to vote, back toward the parking lot or whatever. But that's that 50 feet, and you're well protected. That's no electioneering or anything should take place in that area. And I do want to say this too, Stan, and is that this is an important election. I've been voting for over 50 years, and this is the most important election ever. And folk, I can assure that most of the people that are listening to us tonight have registered. They've either voted or they have a plan to vote already. But we got to do a little bit more. We've got to get everybody we know. And in North Carolina, we have a strong Eastern, the black voters are very strong in the East if we can get them moving. The way the East go, the way the state goes. And so if you know people in the East, if you're living in the East, just make sure that everybody you know and everybody you can talk to will go vote. And they should be able to do that. And just remember, no one should ever tell you that you cannot vote. They can offer you a provisional ballot, and be sure to follow up on that provisional ballot.
Let me ask you this, and this ties into sort of a bigger question I've had, but there are some places, and I'm not sure if North Carolina is one of them, where if there is a certain mark on your ballot outside of where you actually circling your vote, then that ballot is invalid. Is that the case in North Carolina?
Say that again. Now, there should not be.
So somebody writes on your ballot for whatever reason, then that can um, discount your ballot. And so I've read that's the case in some states where essentially there has to be no other markings on your ballot other than where you fill in for your candidate of choice.
So I'm hearing that a lot as well, Chambers. And what I'm telling a lot of individuals are, and this is not just on panel, this is just family members, friends, take your time on your ballots, read over them, look over them front and back, as well as don't be afraid to ask the poll workers whether or not they're fine. I know in Maryland, what they're doing is a lot of my peers are doing the absentee ballots or early voting mail-ins, okay? And you're getting a confirmation from the Maryland State Board of Elections. So hopefully North Carolina is doing that. I'm on the website right now. If there are any issues, I would say, check your local, but at the very least, go to the state Board of Elections. And I believe I have here North Carolina's is www.ncsbe.gov. They have a lot of the voting information on there, as well as whatever county you're located in. Reach out to the different NAACP local chapters. Normally they have legal redress in all of these areas. But yes, Chambers, I'm hearing the same thing in regards to the issues with if your ballot is incorrect or at all. They're probably going to throw it out, depending on which county you're in. I'm pretty sure if you're in Patterson or Courtney's, and I call everybody by last names, Patterson. So
okay.
if you're in Mr. Patterson's district, more than likely you are going to have your ballot counted. However, if you're in another county that doesn't look like Mr. Patterson, that's going to be a problem. And I think, voting is a community effort. A lot of times I hate when I see my peers or people in general talking down to the general public, when I say general public, other people of color or blacks that may not be in the same similar situations. Oh, why aren't they voting? Or what are they doing? I remember in, I believe it's 2008 was the first time. I had been voting probably since 2004. But 2008 was when did I turn 18? 2004. But the 2008 election was the first time that I can remember that I actually picked up my phone and text about, 10 of my friends, hey, y'all voting this morning, what time y'all going to the polling place? That type of effort, even though it might have taken me 10, 15 minutes out of my day to pick up my phone and text. I do know other individuals, whether it's church buses or people with vans are gassing the vans up and assisting people. And I know Mr. Patterson said from the East, but here we have East and West Baltimore as well. And, helping individuals bus to the polls. I think right now, more than anything, they says it takes a village, I believe right now, and getting out the vote, just voting, who we all know who everyone, is conceiving that people think we're going to voting for. However, the actual vote, if for some reason the census is off, but we have all these individuals that are voting, these are going to be things that say, okay, something was wrong with that census, which I believe based on COVID, that's going to be a major problem. And this precinct has only 2,000 people that have done the census, but we have 20,000 people that have voted, this voting is probably the most important. Once again, as Mr. Patterson stated, not just because of the election, but because of all the other variables that go along with voting in this election. So
let me ask both of you gentlemen. So let's say someone goes to vote at the polls and there is a problem, whether someone tries to pitch their candidate within that 50 feet barrier, whether you feel like there are one too many cops at the polling place, or if there's, say, gentlemen across the street with semi-automatic rifles, or if you get to the poll worker and just something is just weird, whatever the case may be, or a poll worker, like we mentioned earlier, just writes a check mark on your poll or scribble something on your poll. So whatever issue that you suspect, what do you do?
So Patterson has already stated, if you see it, you must report it, say something. Election protection is one of the main organizations that I've used in the past. I believe the number is 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And this is where the calls will go to the actual call center. Okay. And there are different types of organizations that are doing it. That's just a number that I, have been passing out, and I continue to pass out, that 1-866-OUR-VOTE. But once again, you approach that individual, and a lot of times there will be election workers, whether that's the chief, president of that poll house or polling place. There are different names for it, okay? You want to seek that person out. You want to seek out one of the volunteers to say, hey, this is going on. But just reporting it to that district is not enough. You must go out and report it to the national organizations that are doing this work, the Lawyers Committee, the NAACP, and they all have on-call individuals for every different state. I believe, we had Pennsylvania, we had North Carolina calls coming into the command center I was in, but there's command centers for almost every state. And you guys in North Carolina are a very, very important state in regards to making sure that North Carolina gets reported because of some of the more recent cases that both myself and Mr. Patterson has talked about. So once again, report it to locally, to whoever the poll worker is, so that they can report it to the chief. Make sure that they report it because they're going to be so busy. It's COVID. They probably have certain precautions they all have to have in place. So when you tell a poll worker something, watch them. If they say okay and then go on to the next person and the next person, you're in line anyway. You can see whether or not they report it to someone. Also, take your phone out and call that 1-866-OUR-VOTE number and make sure you report it nationally because there's a database being taken of all the different issues. And, if this does go to the Supreme Court, which every election, these types of cases could get to the Supreme Court, we want to be able to say, hey, we got this many calls in these different states that have always had issues based on pre-clearance, as well as these are states that we need to start thinking about having some type of, as Mr. Patterson stated, some type of consent decree or some type of things that are put in place to protect these Black voters or these minority voters in this area. Because what's happening is, and I say minority voters, of course, this is a Black platform, right now. However, what's happening is that based on our communities, a lot of individuals that are that English is their second language are moving into our communities, okay? And what that happens is sometimes, and not sometimes, there's power in numbers, right? So if you're getting not only the Black issues, but you're also getting that, hey, there was a family that's, they're obviously a citizen, because if you're there, and you're not going to show up to a polling place with all that's involved if you're not a U.S. citizen or have gone through the steps to obtain your citizenship, right? And you get there, but now here's an elderly woman who may have her grandson helping her or whatever, but that individual only speaks Spanish. And this elderly lady is, may not be able to see well or whatever it may be. And now that person not able to vote. These are all the things that we must report, that we must state, because at the end of the day, those are power in numbers. And in essence, that does help the Black community as well.
So I do want to throw in a shameless plug real quick. So I feel like when reporting voting rights violations, I feel like there's nothing wrong with redundancy. And so along with calling with that number, I think it was 866 our vote. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have, and I have in North Carolina, the vote, it is our vote, but it's 888 our vote. And so I don't know, and I think there may be Landon 866 our vote too, but I know that in North Carolina, the number right now is 888 our vote. And that is staffed with, it's a desk that is staffed with attorneys. If you, for some reason, don't get through and you get a, leave everything, leave your name, your contact information, and somebody will get back to you. I do want to say that also, everybody has a right when you go vote in North Carolina to ask for assistance. And the only thing, you can take someone into a voting booth with you to help you mark your ballot. Even so, there are people sometimes that will even, and I've had problems with people reporting this, but it's nothing wrong if that person has to mark your ballot, that you're asking for assistance, because there are times, there are medical conditions that don't allow a person to hold their hand steady enough to mark a bubble. And so therefore, that's also, you have people who are visually impaired. All kinds of things are existing. And let me also say this, during early voting, the rest of early voting, and on election day, if you physically are not able to stand in a line, walk into a voting place, you can vote curbside in North Carolina. You can vote curbside, and that you and somebody asked me the other day, well, how do I know this person who came out to get my ballot put it in? The same way you would know, you can go, Landon talked about that website at the North Carolina State Board of Election, which is www.ncsbe. That is .gov. That is, you can go to your county, well, you can go to a site that, on there that says voter lookup, okay? And you can actually go and find out any voter history you want, anything. And if you voted today, you can go to that site and your name should be there that you voted. It will be under absentee, because any voting that takes place in North Carolina that does not happen on election day is considered as absentee voting. And of course, if you do a mail-in ballot, that's absentee by mail. So you can always look that up. I had someone call me on Saturday and say, I want to know if they got if the Board of Election got my ballot. And so Sunday I called him back and I said, I just looked it up. Yeah, your ballot got, and I told him how he could look it up, find it and everything and track through it. But you can see your ballot. You can see that you voted, even early voting or whatever. You can always track the information in case you have any doubt about your ballot. Voting in North Carolina is safe. They should be given masks. You're not required in North Carolina to wear a mask, but everybody could be offered a mask. They should get a pin that they keep, that they don't have to have, and they get gloves. This should be handed in. And we have over probably some 600 sites in North Carolina through North Carolina NC4BL, North Carolina for Black Lives. We have set up several what we call power, protection, and encouragement. And that's PPE, where we've actually set up where we have food all day, breakfast food, biscuits and coffee maybe in the morning, a lunch food, a dinner food that people can actually get when they go to the polls to vote. There'll be a lot of them out there on election day. Every site is not covered. People try to do the ones that they have a large number of people of color voting. And also they have a 7-member really, with a lead security team that is there to diffuse, to report anything that goes on that may be intimidating voters. So these are some of the things in North Carolina that we've been able to have, and that we would we're encouraging people to feel comfortable going to the polls and voting. Again, COVID-wise, there've been a lot of work done by the State Board of Election to ensure voters are safe, that all of the safety protocols are being taken at the voting sites, wherever they are.
So a few quick things. One, so again, this is a conversation. So if you guys have questions, please use the Q&A to ask your question, or if you really want to verbally ask your question, you can raise your hand. Two, regarding the point with the voter search. So I voted absentee. Requested my ballot in the mail, got in the mail, filled it out, and then I physically went and dropped it off at my local Board of Elections office, which is in Durham. And the next day, I went to, for those in North Carolina, the ncsbe.gov website. I scrolled down to voter tools, which is close to the bottom. You click on voter search, a pop-up pops up, and you can type in your name. And you can really just type in your name and your county, unless you have a very general name, then you might need to enter some more information. But typed in my name, typed in my county. There's only 2 Stan Chambers in Durham County, who knew? And I scroll down to the bottom, it says absentee ballot, and it shows election date, which is the 3rd, the county, absentee status, the ballot return date, September 28th, return method in person, and return status accepted. And so this popped up, I would say, less than 24 hours after I submitted my ballot in person. So there is that option. And again, nothing wrong with a little redundancy. There's another option to call or reach out to and report any voter suppression efforts on the federal level. So shameless plug, if you go to triangleiotas.org, you should go there now, triangleiotas.org, and then you scroll down a little bit on the homepage, you'll see a section called Time to Build. And so you click on that, you go to the Time to Build page, and then you scroll down, and you'll see the Time to Build logo, which is our voter FAQ page. And this is related to voter-related questions in North Carolina. And if you scroll down the page, which I am doing right now, towards the bottom, it says, I believe my voting rights were violated. What do I do? So, along with the numbers that Courtney and Landon mentioned, there's also the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, which also has an online form and a toll-free number for you to call and report any violations of your voting rights. And so there is a direct link to that site where there's a number and there's a form for you to fill out. And there's also links to the North Carolina Board of Elections, and also your a page where you can find your respective county Board of Elections, this is for North Carolina. So I'm not one for long conversations, but if there was, and this is for both of you gentlemen, when we think about what's been happening, just the temperature in the room regarding this election cycle, regarding the things we've heard, say during the primaries, what was it, Louisville? There was one polling place for the city of Louisville, which is like 600,000 people. When you hear of all these things, and you say you see something that's wrong and you report it. You report it to your federal officials, state officials, the NAACP and other organizations that are tracking these sort of things. For your quote unquote average person, is that it? Or is there more that they can do? When we talk about voter suppression.
Definitely use those outlets that you just mentioned. the North Carolina NAACP, along with any national NAACP. And I just say report it, the 1-800-866 number, our vote number. And I know Landon mentioned the Lawyers Committee, who have always been at the forefront of fighting for voter rights, especially any form of voter suppression. Southern Coalition for Southern Justice in North Carolina. Also Forward Justice in North Carolina. All of these are great law firms. The North Carolina NAACP, Herb Joyner, who's a law professor at North Carolina Central. All of these folk have a lot of experience with voter. I think that, you know, when you look at the Southern Coalition for Southern Justice and Allison Riggs, who have actually taken case before the U.S. Supreme Court, we have some of the best attorneys in North Carolina as far as election law is concerned as anywhere in the nation. And so what I'm saying is, again, if you see anything, report it as often and as much as you can to every outlet that you have access to. And definitely start with reporting it to the chief judge in that precinct. That's where you want to start. Make sure that the local board of election, if you especially just report it and have it documented that you reported at the local board of elections. And then from there, you want to go outside to any of the advocates for fair voting, voting rights and voting law for people across the state.
Yeah, you know, Chambers, I think we've done, you know, said everything. Of course, when you say, is that all you can do? So much of the voter protection work is done months, years in advance, you know. While we were all marching, which everybody has a place in the movement, right? However, when we were all marching in regards to the a lot of the Black Lives Matters movement based on police brutality, there were a lot of these meetings being held on where the voting precincts would be held, okay? And everybody has a part to play in advocacy, right? Whether it's the looters all the way to the attorneys. Now, there were so many advocates that were probably in Louisville, would have been in a lot of these election protection meetings. So many of us, even myself, you know, and I had to let everybody know, hey, everybody has a place in this movement. My place right now is to make sure I'm upholding the laws in the courtrooms and trying to get, you know, a lot of these guys that are on pretrial home, because I feel as though their right to speedy trials are not being upheld, as well as suing police officers that do break the law, right? And not suing police officers. You can't technically sue the police officers in a lot of states. You have to sue the precincts or their different organizing bodies, but that's a whole different story for another day. So in regards to what people can do, the next election is 2 years from now, to make sure if there's a county that only has one voting precinct, or we know that you know, there were a few of the voting booths that went, you know, awry or did stop working, or that there were some people ballots that didn't get polled, or there's some people that weren't able to vote. That works election, and then we have another 4 years for another presidential election. So, you know, it's time to go to these boards, because I'm pretty sure Mr. Patterson is up beating his hand on the desk, and that's one of my favorite sayings. It just, you know, for advocacy, many times he's probably the only one there, you know, really that's saying, true. Hey, this needs to be done. A lot of times, you know, in advocacy, this sense of, you know, people marching, yes, that's a beautiful scene to see thousands of people in the streets. But a lot of times when it's, you know, when you're having motions for police brutality, it's literally you, the judge, the police officer, the police officers, attorney and maybe one reporter in the room. And that's maybe because there's so many police brutality cases across the world, across the nation. So what happens is we all need to start playing more of a part. We can't just get on social media. We can't just only march. We have to march, but we also have to be in these election board meetings, the city council meetings. We have to make sure we speak up for voting, because voting may be one of the most important things that we do in a 2-year period. But the fact that it only comes around once every 2 years is a major issue. And so it's kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind. And then when it becomes on our mind, it's too late. So right now it's about documenting, doing the documentation, reporting it, right? And all the organizations are great. Then the next step is, once we get this data on what the issues are, then those legislative organizations will say, hey, in North Carolina, these were some of the issues. And then hopefully, Courtney, Mr. Patterson will get some individuals there with a little bit, a little bit blacker hair, a little younger, to come down and help him advocate for some of the positions that he wants, because I'm pretty sure he's tired of being the only guy in that room, and if he had some young people like himself, Chambers, some more, doing these types of educational forums a year out from the election, if he had 5 or 6 people coming in, going against the Board of Election, then guess what? That president or that person that's been appointed to that Board of Election seat or voted in, depending on how you guys do in North Carolina, that person will feel pressure to say, hey, the last 20 years I've been in this position, there have only been 2 or 3 guys show up, and that's throughout the entire year. Now we're having this meeting and they got 15 people in the room. What's going on here? And honestly, that puts more pressure on any issue. Showing up to a Board of Elections meeting, and if you want to show up to a Board of Elections meeting and have your police brutality, Black Lives Matter shirts, having 15 to 20 people show up to a Board of Election meetings will do more for police brutality than if you have 5,000 people marching in the streets. It sounds weird, it sounds off, but a lot of times when we're dealing with these issues, there may be 1 or 2 people, and you end up being the crazy young lawyer, or, oh, Mr. Patterson, all right, Mr. Patterson, we'll give you your 2 minutes. And they know if no news reporter reports on it, nobody will hear about what Mr. Patterson has said. So we definitely need more people to be involved, not during election season, when it's not on the radar, when no one's talking about it, because that's when we get the most done.
So, and we do, and that's real good, Landon, because that is something that most of the time when we're sitting in the Board of Election, even when we're putting in these absentee ballots right now, there's usually only us and the staff of the Board of Elections in the room, just a 5-member board and the staff. Tonight, there were 2 other people in the room other than us. And I think one person who we open up where they can actually use Google Meet, and they can actually log into the meeting. But the thing is that, and that for one-stops or for early voting sites, that's about 3-4 months out before the elections process start. Yes, we need people in there. It makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference when there are people in there. Normally, what I do also is open my meeting. We have an agenda before the meeting. I open my meetings and give individuals from the public an opportunity to speak. Hopefully, those folk will come in and speak to the issues. Hey, look, 2020, we just had an election and we didn't have but one site. We had lines going down the road a mile long, half mile long. We just need to do something about it. And that's the way it's going to start, and it's going to happen. And those people, I'm going to be real honest about this, and the trend has been, there are 2 members of our board, and that hopefully will tell you who they are, but that will always oppose. They want one board, one site at the Board of Election, only open during the hours, no weekend hours whatsoever, no only open during the hours of that. I had to go before the State Board of Elections for our plan. We got 6 sites in Lenoir County, and they fought us tooth and nail for it. And of course, the State Board of Election ruled in our favor.
And if I just very quickly, I know we're trying to get out of here, Chambers. Just 2 more points, because Mr. Patterson has brought some more things on aboard. A lot of times, these are individuals that aren't getting paid. A lot of times, this is real volunteer work. So even if Mr. Patterson, it does have a small budget, he doesn't have enough to even say, let me bring some people on for, the amount of money has to be a labor of love, right? So the volunteers are needed. So if you talk about what other things you can do, if that precinct is supposed to open at 8 o'clock for voting and they open at 8:30, report it. If that precinct tries to say, hey, nobody else is allowed to vote at this point, report it. If you're in line by 8 o'clock, then you should be able to vote. Okay? It should not be if you're inside the door by this time. No. Also, I've seen, if individuals really want to do more than just report, individuals need to make sure that they are watching where the ballots are going. This is where the poll voters are. So these machines, I've heard stories of these machines being left at the local board of elections houses and lost and put in cards and not counted. That kind of vigilant way of watching the actual process from where the vote's going, how is it being packaged, how are they being taken to the Board of Election to being counted? Eventually, who's going to take over from Mr. Patterson in his local way? There's no young people, and a lot of times there aren't. A lot of times what happens is you get Mr. Patterson in a local community, right? And the people that are helping him are people that are his age, okay? So now, who's going to get that 10, 20 years of experience of battling and knowing the history of what's going on in his local election if he doesn't have anybody to tutor or to mentor in the actual process? So there's so much that goes on within this. I hope more people reach out to Mr. Patterson and Black local election folks all over the country. And I tell people all the time, people say, hey, I'm not voting on whatever. It doesn't matter. There's so much money being put in voter suppression and stopping people to vote. I'm talking about there are individuals that are right now becoming millionaires based on policy as well as different ways to get people to vote and to keep people from voting. We must make sure that we understand that, and you gotta follow the money. And voting controls everything. Prosecutor's office. If we know individuals are going to vote a certain way depending on police brutality, trust me, they'll stop killing us. It's so much that happens at this voting process that a lot of individuals aren't making the connection to, because they just think, oh, Biden, oh, Trump, oh, it doesn't really matter. No, they're watching those numbers because people have been in positions of power based on democracy for years, and most people like power, and they want their family to stay in the power. That's it for me, Chambers. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I see she came on there. I'm not too sure, didn't say too much in the background. And thanks for Chambers for having us. We really appreciate it.
So before we do close out, I do want to give Shakima a moment to talk if she so chooses. If not, it's fine.
Yeah, I just want to say that the issue with voter suppression could be as overt or covert. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and I've seen smaller forms of voter suppression. There was an issue where a young lady was denied access to the restroom after waiting for so long during the early stages of early stages of early voting. That incident was reported, and now everyone can use the bathroom at all the precincts in Durham. I just wanted to add that.
And you know what? It's those little things that you wouldn't even understand or know, because when you think about voting, you don't think about standing in line for 3 hours. So now, just that reporting is not important. Not only is it important because now people can use the restroom, now just for me as a voter being on this a panel, now I know, you know what, this is an election that we're going to be standing on. Let me make sure I use the restroom before I leave out. So Shakima, thank you for sharing that, because this, I mean, come on, how can you stand in line for 3 hours? And to be clear, I have not seen one porta potty in all the lines that I've seen. I'll go back and try to see it and look, but a lot of these lines in this election are around the buildings. And if you're standing in line, and we all know that most individuals that are over 45, 50 years old have issues, whether it's men with their prostate and women as well, holding their I don't say bowel movements, but you guys get where I'm going here, okay? And if these individuals can't use the bathroom, now you have the issues of trying to vote, but also being embarrassed if you have to use the restroom. And that's a major issue.
And that is something that has never even been raised. I've been on the board. I've been on the board of elections since 2011, and it has never been raised. That fact that they may be needing a porta potty at the polling places, and that's interesting. Now they are usually, most of our sites do have bathrooms in the buildings. They will have that because we employ people, and therefore we are going to make sure they got access to facilities there. I just want to say this one thing too, Stan. I want to lift up our brothers and sisters and those who have had past maybe felon experiences with the law, and that if they've satisfied that in North Carolina, they don't need any documentation. They don't have to say anything to anybody. They can just go vote. I had a situation, as a matter of fact, in Durham. I was on a panel the other day where this man was told, was telling about he had voted in Durham, and this young man came in, had a child with him, had a baby bag on him, and he got ready, and he went down and he started voting, and he apparently said something about his conviction or what have you, and then they told him he had to go get this, that, or the other. That should have never happened. Even so, they should have let him vote a provisional ballot. But the thing about it was the guy left without voting, and nobody, even that guy didn't know he should have said something. So, but I just want you to, and if you're on extended probation, now if probation is part of your sentence, then you have to have served that out and dealt with that. But if sometime they give you extended probation because you owe fees or restitution or something of that nature, that does not stop you from voting. So you should be able to vote also. So I just want folk to realize that. And yes, if you're in line, if it takes them to 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're in line at 7:30, when the polls close, you can vote. You should, that's where they cut it off. Wherever that last person is in line, and that's the last person who's allowed to vote. So I just wanted to leave that with everybody, Stan.
So, Landon, Courtney, Shakima, thank you. As I said earlier, this is the last session as part of our voter education series. I do want to thank the North Carolina Black Alliance. I do want to thank the Theta Lambda Sigma alumni chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, which Shakima is a member of. And I also want to thank the Beta Pi Sigma alumni chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Efforts like this are not done alone, so it takes a team, and I greatly, greatly appreciate us coming together and pulling this off pretty quickly. And so each of these sessions will be on our website, trainedbyiotas.org. And I think it was Courtney that mentioned doing these sort of things a year before the election. And so that is something I will definitely take up with partners that I mentioned, and that's something we may do. So thank you for all those who came out. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for everyone there are some people who have been a part of all 5 of the sessions. And so I greatly commend you for that. So if you haven't already, go vote and stay safe. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.
hats off to Triangle Lotus for doing this and educating people about voting. I think every opportunity we get to do this type of thing, it lifts up and people being able to go and feel encouraged about voting. Thank you so much for all that you all are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a good evening, everyone.